The storm had begun gathering hours before anyone realized something was wrong. It had seemed harmless at first, a faint smudge of gray along the western horizon, thin as smoke from a dying fire. But as evening crept across Stillwater Ridge, the clouds thickened into angry towers, rolling over the plains with a slow, deliberate menace. The wind arrived next, sharp and restless, rattling the dry grass that stretched for miles like a sea caught mid-wave. By the time the first rumble of thunder reached town, every dog in Stillwater was barking, every porch lantern flickering, every resident staring out their window with an inexplicable sense of unease. Then Eli Moran rode in. He appeared in the distance. First a small silhouette atop a horse that looked half-wild from sweat and exhaustion. The animal's stride wavered, but it climbed forward anyway, pushing through the harsh wind like it understood its rider's refusal to stop. As Eli reached the outskirts of Main Street, the storm's gloom swallowed him whole, turning him into a ghostly figure. Half-lit by the lanterns hanging under storefront WNINGS. Mrs. McClary, sweeping dust from her bakery doorway, was the first to notice. She stopped mid-stroke, the broom falling from her hands. "Sweet heavens," she whispered, reaching for her apron as Eli passed. Something about the sight of him, his rigid posture, the lifeless sway of the satchel against his hip, made the hairs on her arms stand upright. Others looked up one by one, the barber closing shop early, the stable boys hurrying to tie down loose tarps, a traveling peddler gathering his crates before the rain arrived. All watched the rancher move like a man carved from stone, shoulders stiff, eyes forward, jaw clenched so tightly it seemed he might break a tooth. Whatever he carried in that leather bag was weighing on him harder than the storm. By the time Eli reached the center of town, a hush followed him, the kind reserved for funerals and bad news. Even the wind seemed to draw back, leaving behind a heavy silence that made every step of the horse's hooves echo like distant gunshots. The sheriff emerged from his office, pushing through the double doors with urgency. Sheriff Rowe was a big man, broad-shouldered, usually calm, the kind of lawman who settled disputes with a look instead of a bullet. But the second he laid eyes on Eli, all the calm drained from his face. "Eli," he called, already stepping off the wooden platform, boots thudding against the soaked earth. "Son, what on God's green earth are you doing riding into town like that?" Eli didn't look at him. He swung off the saddle and landed hard on his feet, almost stumbling. His clothes were streaked with dust and mud, torn at the elbows, his shirt soaked through with sweat and something darker. His hat brim dripped water, though it hadn't rained yet. Rowe moved to block him. "Eli, look at me." Slowly, Eli raised his eyes. What the sheriff saw there made his stomach drop. It was grief, deep and raw fury, barely contained, and something else even worse, certainty. "Don't," the sheriff said, his voice roughening. "Don't do this." Eli brushed past him. "Eli." Rowe grabbed his arm. "Damn it, boy, stop and think, I've thought," Eli finally growled, wrenching free. "More than you know." The sheriff followed at his heels like a shadow, gesturing to the townsfolk who had begun crowding under awnings to avoid the growing wind. "Everyone back inside. Go on, clear the street." But almost no one moved. Fear and curiosity held them in place. The street lanterns flickered violently as the wind swelled, blowing grit and dry leaves across Eli's boots. His horse, left behind, snorted anxiously but didn't run. "Eli," the sheriff tried again, softer this time. "If you walk through those courthouse doors with that bag, everything changes. There's no undoing it." Eli didn't answer. He kept walking, each step heavier than the last. A door slammed open behind them, and rapid footsteps slapped across wet wood. Mary Fletcher burst through the crowd, still wearing the flour-dusted apron from her bakery. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide with dread. "Eli!" she cried, catching up to him and placing both hands on his chest. "Please stop. Just stop for one moment." He halted. For the first time since arriving in town, his breathing wavered. Mary's voice trembled. "What happened?" "You're scaring everyone. You're scaring me." Eli swallowed hard, but the words stayed stuck in his throat. His eyes darted away from her face, as though looking directly at her might break something inside him. "You can't go in there," she whispered, shaking her head. "Think about what you're doing. Think of your father's ranch. Think about—" "I am thinking," he said softly. "That's the problem." Mary's hands pressed harder against him as if she could anchor him in place. "Then think of the boy's family. Think of the consequences." "Eli, please. Don't do this." His jaw tightened, but he gently removed her hands, one at a time. Like a man laying down fragile objects he didn't want to damage. "I'm sorry, Mary." Before she could respond, he stepped around her and continued toward the courthouse. Thunder cracked overhead, louder than any gunshot, making several townsfolk flinch. Then, as if the sky had been waiting for that exact moment, rain exploded from the clouds. It came down hard, drumming against roofs, soaking clothes in seconds, turning the dirt road into dark mud. Still, Eli pushed on. The courthouse loomed ahead, its tall white pillars lit by lanterns that flickered wildly in the wind. Inside the windows, silhouettes moved frantically, Judge Halloran pacing, deputies rushing to prepare for Eli's arrival now that the sheriff had sent a rider ahead to warn them. By the time Eli reached the steps, he was drenched. Water streamed from his hat brim, ran down his back, and soaked the satchel hanging under his arm. Lightning flashed behind him, casting his figure in stark silhouette. Sheriff Rowe climbed the steps after him. "Eli, I'm begging you now, not as sheriff, but as someone who's known you since you were a boy. Whatever you think you found, let us handle it properly." "You've had plenty of chances to handle things properly," Eli said without turning. "Nothing happened. There's a process. There's corruption." Rowe exhaled sharply. "You're accusing powerful people. Dangerous people. I know, and this won't end clean. I know." The sheriff grabbed his shoulder again, spinning him around. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat onto Eli's face. "You bring that evidence in there, and the town turns upside down. Folks won't forgive you. Some won't even listen. And the judge, I'm not here for forgiveness." Eli jerked free and marched through the courthouse doors. The sound slammed through the hall like thunder. Inside, the air was thick and warm compared to the storm outside. Lanterns glowed against the wooden walls, casting long shadows. Mud and water dripped from Eli's boots as he walked across the polished floor. Judge Halloran stood at the far end, face red, hands trembling with barely controlled anger. "Rancher Moran," he boomed, "what is the meaning of this intrusion?" "Sheriff Rowe, why have you allowed—" Eli didn't wait for him to finish. He stomped right up to the central table where court papers, ink bottles, and half-written documents lay, and threw the soaked satchel onto it. The leather made a heavy slap. The judge flinched. "Open it," Eli said. Judge Halloran blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said open it." The deputies exchanged uneasy looks. Sheriff Rowe sighed, rubbing his forehead, bracing himself for the impact of whatever would come next. Slowly, the judge tugged the strap free and lifted the flap. His fingers froze. Inside, nestled in mud-stained cloth, lay the silver pocket watch that had belonged to Tommy Reyes, the young ranch hand who died 2 nights ago, in a rock slide at the East Ridge. A watch Tommy never took off. A watch missing from his body when the sheriff found him, and below it, a torn strip of expensive wool, dark green, with a distinctive gold thread pattern, the kind worn only by one man in town, the judge's son, Raymond Halloran. The judge's face drained of color. Gasps erupted from the doorway where townsfolk now jammed together, listening, trembling, watching the impossible unfold. Sheriff Rowe muttered under his breath. Mary, standing behind the crowd, clasped her hands over her mouth. The judge slowly looked up at Eli. Where did you find this?" "Buried near the ridge," Eli said. "Under the loose rocks. Someone tried to hide it, but the storm last night exposed the soil." "That doesn't mean—" "It does," Eli interrupted, voice cracking with rage and grief. "Your son was with Tommy," they argued. Witnesses heard them earlier that day. "And when the rocks came loose, Tommy didn't stand a chance?" "That's circumstantial," the judge snapped, though his voice shook. "And you dare accuse my son?" "I dare because it's the truth." The room erupted with voices, angry, afraid, confused. Some shouted at Eli, some shouted at the judge. Others simply cried. Lightning flashed through the courthouse windows. Rain hammered the roof. But Eli stood still, drenched, exhausted, staring at the man who had controlled this town for far too long. Mary whispered from the doorway, barely audible over the chaos. "Eli, what have you done?" Eli didn't turn. He didn't waver. He simply answered the only way he could, what no one else would. And outside? The storm raged on, louder, fiercer, as if the sky itself had been waiting for someone to finally speak the truth.